Hey everybody. We are living in a world transformed now. Many science fiction novels and scenarios practiced by the military resemble the circumstances we are now living in. And that's going to be extremely difficult and unpredictable for the foreseeable future. The vast majority of my close friends no longer have jobs. All of them are concerned, some of them less so than others. Those of them who are used to living closer to the poverty line are less concerned than those of them who depend upon their income for survival, for housing, for food. People are vastly more reactive in a wide variety of ways. A few people who have been relatively quiet historically on my Facebook page have become disturbingly noisome in ways that I don't personally welcome. But that's a very small number of people. Nice to see you. There's also people being kind and friendly and reaching out toward one another. I think when people see others coughing or sneezing, they're somewhat reasonably concerned. And my city is a city transformed. Pretty much everything that is ordinarily operating is closed, with the exception of things like banks and grocery stores. The botanical gardens are closed. This is something I find, this particular thing that I'm looking at, I find very disturbing, but it's pretty common. The arborists in the garden have cut these trees down. There is clearly nothing wrong with either of these trees. You can tell just by looking at their at the stumps, right? There's nothing noticeably wrong with these trees, except that humans have decided, to chop them off. Trees have probably been there for 40 years. These trees are very important to the local owl population. There's another one. It's like they took out 4 of the trees that ordinarily are here. And these are trees that the owls would use regularly for their mating behavior. I've seen owls in these trees regularly lately. We are about to come into a new moon cycle today and tomorrow. which I will be celebrating as I always do. I left my home 2 weeks ago, yesterday, for a work assignment. As some of you are aware from having watched my videos. There's a couple of very modest things I will communicate, which maybe haven't been particularly well transmitted in the media and the frenzy that's been going on. While I was away from home, I was vastly more subject to news than I've been in probably 20 or 30 years. Just due to the circumstances of my work assignment. And that was extremely challenging emotionally, psychically. I have been paying attention to my dreaming, and now that we're, not, our cycles may, be at least modestly disrupted or significantly disrupted, I'd like to encourage everyone to pay close attention to their dreams. Dreaming isn't nonsense. Without dreaming, you wouldn't have a mind, and you wouldn't be able to survive. So dreaming is a fundamental behavior, not just of our minds, but of our whole being, yeah? And it involves aspects of our being that science is ill-equipped to understand, explain, approach, map. Though this isn't a reflection on the scope or dependability of science. Well, it is a reflection on the scope, but not the dependability. Within the domains where science is useful, science is profoundly useful to us as a species. But outside those domains, it has a necessarily limited scope. And it is not equipped to inform us much at all about the underpinnings of our being, our essence, our intelligence, our memory, our dreaming, our origins, and perhaps our destinations. So I'd like to encourage all of you to pay very close attention to your dreaming in a gentle way. To prime yourself to remember your dreams as you go to sleep at night. And I'll make a recommendation about that specifically in a moment. To record your dreams upon awakening if you have no other responsibilities or obligations that supersede your first morning activities. I would encourage you to begin or continue a detailed dream journal and to record not just the plots that you may remember, but the feeling tones that might have been associated with those plots, what you felt. Dreaming is so radically different from our waking consciousness. It's a completely other way of knowing. And there are aspects of dreaming that are, in my view, clairvoyant, transcendent, prophetic, and very profoundly rewarding to engage with directly. So I'm encouraging you to reconnect or to deepen your connection with your dreaming life. Those of you who have watched my videos are aware I'm often on this, orbiting this topic. And by the way, dreaming and also memory are situations that respond better to a gentle parabolic approach rather than a direct head-on approach. When one is struggling to recall a word or a name or what you were just thinking about, a thread of thought, I've learned for myself that circling, rather than continually approaching head-on or trying to penetrate directly, circling allows the mind and memory the opportunity to re-recognize what, the content that we are seeking. Whether that's in our vocabulary or our memory or our consciousness of threads being the particular pathways of thought or a conversation that arise and transform and branch as we are speaking and conversing with each other. And when you are speaking with your dreaming mind, if you wish to, when you're communicating with your dreaming mind, which you may do in images, right? You may have an image of embracing your dreaming mind, or you may also speak, although speaking is perhaps less native to our dreaming mind than we might imagine. I think we imagine that we have conversations in dreams, but I suspect that what's really going on is not primarily linguistic. Though there are unusual occasions where we are near to waking consciousness where language may intrude on dreaming. If you are communicating with your dreaming mind, I urge you to let your consciousness, the place of your awareness, the home of your awareness, to sink down through your body, to sink down into the deep belly. Yeah. What the Japanese and Zen people might refer to as the hara, which is deep within your lower abdomen. Let your awareness sink down in there and form the images of communicating with your dreaming mind. Imagine yourself relating lovingly, with attention and awareness, with reverence, joyfully, curiously. Continuously encourage and reassure your dreaming mind that you recognize its profound value and that you are relating with it reverently, with passion and wonder and awe and joy, and that you're so grateful for this relationship with the dreaming mind and with dreaming. And if you want to speak into your belly. Let your consciousness, your awareness deep within your belly speak down there rather than up here. And I suspect that if you practice these things over time, you will be surprised to discover that your dreaming mind will respond. It will help you to both to dream and to recall your dreaming. And as you practice recalling your dreaming, you will find, sorry, I just inhaled an insect. As you practice recalling your dreaming, I think you will find that your recall will become more enriched, more constant, more common, and eventually you may remember not just one or two dreams, but many dreams each night. And this is an aspect of intimacy with the origins of our minds that I think is both healthy and fascinating. Of course, if you find that you have no interest in such matters, by all means, feel free to pursue those things that fascinate and interest you. Not everyone is concerned with what happens with our minds while we sleep. There's a woman collecting some kind of herb on the side of this mountain. Yeah. It's interesting. Wonder what she's after up there. So, I'm going to talk a little bit today about something I think our people, we used to be aware of and we have forgotten. And this is a topic that interests me very deeply. I would call it cognitive and relational and perhaps even spiritual archaeology, right? To go within and discover the aspects of our humanity, our faculties, our intelligence, our capacities for sensing and relation that have been lost to us, particularly in the modern era, however we may frame that. It's hard to put a window around that for me. I'd say, to some degree, maybe the last 5,000 years, but particularly the last 500 years, and very, very dramatically the last 50. Because in each of those little windows, the nature of our humanity and what the context in which we were immersed and from which we drew our understanding of role and potential have radically transformed, just as they are doing now. And the transformation we are experiencing now presents us with a variety of astonishing opportunities, particularly because many of us will no longer be, we will not be acting as mere functions during our daily lives. Now, that's going to present us with survival challenges, and many of us are rightfully concerned about that. However, it's also an opportunity to explore aspects of our inherent humanity and our cognition and our minds, our essences, our souls, our spirit, that otherwise there's no space for, right? Earlier, I made a little video of a couple of ravens that were, and this is not the only pair I've seen doing this or the only group. I made a video about some ravens that were exhibiting incredibly bold behavior, allowing humans to pass within 2 or 3 feet of them, and in the daytime entering the park garbage cans and pulling things out, which they would never ordinarily do. The ravens are extremely sensitive to and opportunistic around the human behavior. They are animals that we can refer to as synanthropes. Syn essentially means with, and anthropes means humans. So animals like ravens and squirrels and raccoons and skunks, opossums, rats and mice, sparrows, blue jays, all of the corvids, and to some degree waterfowl such as ducks and geese, and raptors such as owls and hawks. They are animals who can prosper to a degree in very close proximity to humans. And the behavior of these animals has radically transformed because the pace of the technological environment has slowed down astonishingly in an extremely short period of time, in 7 days. It's gone from frenetic, constant, hugely noisy activity to relatively calm, quiet, sporadic activity. And the animals are going to certainly be taking advantage of this because they are fundamentally opportunistic in the way that many aspects of nature and our own humanity naturally are. So I'm excited to see that behavior. This spring is going to be an astonishing new experience where we will have the opportunity to observe all kinds of astonishing, exciting, unexpected situations, behaviors, opportunities. And there's a dark side and a bright side. And actually, there's 70 sides, not 2. One of the bizarre things that happens to us in human culture is that we're trained to think in dichotomies or polarities, like bipolarities. It's good or bad, it's this or that, it's us or them. I think it's a tragic misapprehension and extremely misleading. Circumstances, objects, and situations are not very, very uncommonly imbued with the specific qualities we associate with goodness or badness. And so our experience of those qualities depends primarily upon the purposes, intentions, and orientations with which we approach interpreting things. We derive qualities from circumstances and situations based on our purposes, our orientations, our habits, our intentions. What have we historically done, for example, both as individuals, as groups, and as supergroups of various kinds. We tend to talk about, for example, nations as though they were people. America thinks, no, it doesn't. America doesn't have organs in that sense. Any organs that America might have are analogous at best. So, as I'm constantly at pains to express, our relationship with language is misleading, and it's very useful for us to become aware of that together and to practice new ways of knowing, new ways of learning, new ways of relating with language. We are taught to think. So one of the bizarre features of English is that there are a variety of metaphors that are very prevalent in English that underlie our understanding of and relationship with a vast array of phenomenon. And it's not my intention to highlight all of those at the moment, but I will mention a couple of them. One of them is the metaphor of possession, right? That, for example, you possess rights. It's hilarious. You have rights, right? As though you had a special pocket in which these objects called rights were held and no one should take them away from you. It is impossible for you to possess rights. You may be able to experience the benefit of certain ideological structures that you are capable financially or physically of defending. But even that is a metaphor that implies that the capacity to retain access to these structured fictions is a battle, right? In which someone will try to take them away from you. Similarly, we are scripted to, I hope that you can see how nonsensical that is when we actually look at what's going on. There's no way you could possess rights. Rights are not objects. You can't collect them. They can't be bought and sold. And yet, financial resources are one of the ways in our culture, in our society, that these structured fictions can be asserted and or what's a better word than defended? Tough. They can be enforced. But even that metaphor is pretty strange. This is where I sucked up a gnat last time. Unfortunate little creature. Sorry about that. So we have this idea also. The possession metaphor is very prevalent in English. The container metaphor. The accounting metaphors. For example, you have to pay for a crime. If someone wrongs you, they owe you a debt. All these kinds of things. These are not common metaphors in every language, though that they are common in Western languages. There are languages in which the metaphors are different. But as I am not here today to talk about language, but rather minds, I'll move on to my topic since it's getting dark. I think we are trained to believe that my mind is a certain way. That I know how my mind is, that my mind is a possession, that I know the functions and capacities and features and faculties of my mind in the same way I might know, for example, how I like to ride a bike, or how I am inclined to speak, write, dance, walk, run. I'm familiar with the uniquely personal features of my mind, presuming again that I possess one, right? When I say my, the metaphor is one of possession. However, a mind is a thing not unlike a flower. A flower visited by many bees that receives and transmits a vast array of different kinds of substances via the wind and via pollinators. A mind is more analogous to a radio receiver, the content of which is transformed by the signals in which it is immersed, and the nature of which is transformed by the context in which it is signaling. Why is it emitting signals? So minds are a transforming thing. They only resemble static possessions when we are isolated. And that's part of why isolation in our culture is treated commonly as a punishment. It is because the nature of minds and of our humanity, these animals actually recognize me. They know that I sometimes bring them food, though I did not do so today. And they are also acting very differently than they might usually act. Now, in the context here, these animals are approachable because they are used to being approached and sometimes fed by humans. There are other contexts where if you were to approach either of these animals if you were to approach within, say, 60 feet of one of these geese, they would immediately go into either aggressive or profoundly defensive behavior. Context matters. All of the animals here are behaving differently. They're allowing the birds like robins and crows and ravens and such are allowing vastly closer approaches than they would ordinarily permit. Now, if you listen carefully to my language, you will see that it's fraught with metaphors, right? For example, that an animal permits or repulses approach. It tolerates things, right? In any case, what I want to get at is that our minds are not like what we have been taught. Let's see, how shall I put this? They more significantly resemble animals in a flock, such as a flock of birds, animals in a school, such as in a school of fish, animals in a pack, such as in a pack of wolves. Wow. You can hear all of the activity of the white cheeks, the Opspini in Blackfoot, if I remember correctly. And they are much more vocal this evening than they would ordinarily be. Hi. So, what I want to communicate about is that we have the wrong idea, or we have a deceptive and disabling idea, a crippling idea, about what it is to participate in consciousness. None of us possesses a mind. It's not something, you can only know its features if you enforce a structure you are familiar with in isolation. And this is what most of us are taught to do. I think in general, men much more than women, though I may be wrong, and that would be different in different places, in different situations, in different times. But yesterday I was practicing forming a mind with another person in a conversation, and the results were both astonishing and beautiful and reassuring, and they demonstrated aspects of the nature of consciousness, the non-ordinary nature of consciousness, that I have long been familiar with and have experienced, but have only very uncommonly experienced for quite some time. And that was very reassuring, because I know very well that minds are something we make together, so that when we are with others, we can insist on the features and faculties, senses, beliefs, opinions, orientations, habits, demands, assertions, and so on, that we are used to, that are comfortable to us, that are familiar to us. Just as we might do in isolation, we can do this when we are with others, when we are in conversation, when we are purposefully coming together. And this is what the majority of us most commonly do, it seems. At least, let us say a large faction of us commonly do this. We protect the familiar structure of an array of habits and orientations, beliefs, positions, assertions, refutations, arguments, so on, rather than what I would describe as forging a mind together with another for purposes upon which we agree, and exploring the opportunities that are natural to our human consciousness. And I want to assure you those opportunities are astonishingly more rich and diverse than anything we have been led to expect, and that they are so near at hand that any one of us at any time, given another with whom we can share, can experience aspects of consciousness that have been relegated to the the dusty libraries of myth and perhaps religion. So I'm going to suggest to you that forming a mind with another being, and that can happen with animals, that can happen with a living place, that can happen with trees, that can happen with plants, with insects. In fact, I would like to suggest to you that if you really want to test some of the capacities of your mind, of consciousness that you can participate in, some of the most peculiar opportunities exist when we are willing to touch the world of the very small. Because to a creature such as a bee, or a mouse, or a common housefly, the power of the mind of an animal as complex as a human being is enormous, right? It's the difference between, you know, a beach ball and a BB. You have a gigantic brain, you have a gigantic body. Compared to a bee, your body might as well be a mountain, compared to, say, a moose or an elk or something, right? So I want to encourage you to experiment, because our minds are not meant to exist in isolation. And when they are forced into this habit, this pattern, in a sense, we become prisoners. We become prisoners of the structures with which we have become familiar and to which we have become habituated. But our capacities to form minds together, and what I mean by this is as if each mind is a wing. And as you can imagine, a wing flopping around on the ground is not particularly interesting. But should a bird appear between two separate wings, they now have the capacity for flight and other astonishing things, to see from above, to rise above the flat terrain to which the lone wings are habituated. When we form minds together, we can create entirely other forms of consciousness, attention, awareness, sensing, intelligence, faculties, abilities to see and do and perceive and participate in things which would otherwise to us seem impossible. And it is our nature to have these experiences. This is part of what children are doing when they're engaged in the activity we call play. But for most of the adults, they believe, and it is their experience, that a mind is a stable, static possession. I assure you this is not the case. In fact, I would suggest that if we were to attempt to quantify what's going on with consciousness, 99% of it is something other than individual beings possessing minds. Most of what is accessible to us, most of the fascinating and awe-inspiring potentials lie in producing the third position. Between us, we create a new position that neither of us can inhabit alone. From that new position, we acquire new abilities, insights, senses, purposes, and understandings. It's wonderful when we can do this in direct proximity with each other. That's extremely powerful. But many astonishing features of what I'm speaking about are available to us in any situation where we can communicate, and much more so, vastly more so, when we can hear each other's voices. So I encourage you to experiment with leaving the cage of the mind that you are familiar with, the mind you think of as your possession, the mind you think of as yourself, because in my experience, that is the tiniest aspect of consciousness or self, and it's a trap. And it's a trap that our cultures and our situations and our modernity has recursively reinforced to such an extent that very few people are any more aware of the actual nature and profound variability and dynamism of our consciousness, our intelligence, our humanity. That consciousness is so vast and so dynamic and unimaginably ancient. It has faculties that make the ideas associated with psychism seem trivial. Our actual nature and potential is so far beyond any of the stories we've been presented with, that if you were to get just a momentary taste of it, it would obliterate the entire history of stories you've ever encountered. And I'm hoping that perhaps in this time, when we are no longer so astonishingly distracted or subjugated to and by the functions we must fulfill in our modern lives to sustain our shelters and our food supplies and our capacity to receive medical care, we have a unique opportunity here to not only explore the lost aspects of our humanity, to establish new terrain together. And I say to you, my fellow human beings, that terrain, that potential, surpasses anything we are capable of imagining prior to having the direct experience of it. It is wildly beyond our common thoughts, beliefs, and ideas. So far beyond that, again, were we to have a direct experience of what I'm speaking of, those things would be obliterated. Something scared our people a long time ago. It scared us so badly that we stopped practicing the relational and cognitive and imaginal intimacies of which we are naturally capable. Perhaps in this time, some of us can not only escape that old trap, we can establish new terrain far beyond what we are used to and familiar with, far beyond what we are ordinarily capable of believing. And if a few of us can go there and sort of gain a foothold there, we will be able to invite many others into new ways of knowing, new ways of being human, new ways that are actually ancient, exquisite, intelligent, ecstatic, humane, liberating. So I think we form minds together, and when we do that creatively, the possibilities are infinite. I look forward to pursuing this topic more deeply in future videos, but I thought it might be nice to introduce it today because I had such an unexpectedly beautiful and important and accidental experience of this yesterday with someone very dear to me who I had not heard from in a long, long time. And we had experiences during this conversation of clairvoyance and all kinds of unusual and beautiful phenomena. Ah, the bats are out very early tonight. I'm very happy to see them. So we will pursue this topic again soon. Thank you so much for your attention, for joining me. Please feel free to share my video or to ask questions or comment. But I very deeply hope that you will have the opportunity to directly experience what I am speaking of and not merely think about it. It is not enough to consider my words. I speak of the potential of enacting them. And this, it is my hope, is what we shall be able to pursue together in this very unusual and opportunistic moment in human history. Thank you. All blessings to you and those you love, those who love you. May you be well. Bye-bye for now. Howdy.